Hi everyone. Over the past few years, so much has happened in our family's life as I've been trying to change my career. In this video, I'll be updating you on what's been going on and where we're heading. Alright, first, for those of you who don't know, here's a little history of my career path. In 2008, I graduated from UBC Sauder School of Business with a BCom in marketing. With a bad recession going on, it was a terrible time to graduate. I couldn't land a marketing job, so I moved to Seoul, where I worked as an English teacher at a public middle school by day and a musician by night. During this period of my life, I used YouTube a lot to market my music, and I managed to grow quite a big following. Then, in 2013, while back home in Canada, I went completely self-employed and became a full-time YouTuber. I had some amazing experiences. I got to go on paid trips all over the world, but once the novelty of being a YouTuber wore off, I realized I don't really like being a YouTuber. I didn't like how unstructured my work was. Having gotten accustomed to all my work hours and breaks all set for me by the traditional school system that I grew up with, I feel like as an adult, I really depend on that kind of structure to feel like I'm being productive. So it gave me a lot of anxiety to operate outside of that structure. I was also working all the time. Another thing I didn't like was how unpredictable my earnings were. I'd go months without pay, and then out of nowhere, I'd land a gig that pays incredibly well. That kind of unpredictability made it impossible to plan for the future. It also put me in an unfavorable position when it came to competing for a home to rent amidst the housing shortage. And most of all, I didn't like how little I got to interact with people face to face. Most of my clients were in the US, so all of my meetings took place over the computer screen. So in 2017, I got a job with structure, predictable earnings, and more face-to-face interactions. I went back to my marketing roots and got a 9-to-5 corporate office job in marketing. And though it was quite a bit more boring than my work as a YouTuber, I was much happier. Being less stressed about my next paycheck gave me the peace I needed to move forward with having children. And so in 2019, our daughter, Pico, was born. That changed everything for me, including what I wanted out of my work. After having children, I started thinking about how we might eventually need a bigger place to live, which then got me thinking about getting a mortgage, which then got me thinking about job security. And if there's one thing I learned from the 2008 recession, it's that job security in corporations does not exist. That scary truth hit me even harder recently when one of our relatives with children, who also works in tech, got laid off. That got me worrying. What if we've got a mortgage and that happens to me? At least dual income families can soften the blow by temporarily relying on the other partner's income, but that's not how we've set things up for our more traditional single income family. And so as it became clear to me that I'm probably going to get laid off sometime soon, I started thinking about a way to get out on my own terms. Then, in 2020, COVID happened. I forget exactly how long it was, but for a period, we were all forced to work from home. So I lost that face-to-face aspect of my job. That really ate away at me as an extrovert. My job became so painfully boring to me that I had to go on ADHD medication to get through it. And that's when I learned that I needed to change my career altogether. It wasn't just the lack of job security for me anymore. It was that digital marketing was not exciting, social, and fulfilling enough for me as well. So then what's the right job for me? What's out there that's got structured hours of work, predictable earnings, and tons of face-to-face interactions, with job security, the kind where my employment becomes more secure with seniority? What's out there that I would find fulfilling, where I get to use my empathy to help, mentor, motivate, and inspire people? And just as a nice bonus, how about longer vacations to be able to spend more time with my children? Running through this wish list helped me to come back to the idea of teaching as a school teacher. Yeah, I've always felt like being a teacher would be a great fit for me. I just dismissed it for so long, thinking that it was way too late for me to go back to university for another degree. But now I felt like I really needed to look more deeply into this option. And because our family would have to live mostly off of our savings while I'm a full-time student, I was determined to find the fastest option. And that happened to be UBC's 11-month Bachelor of Education program for teaching elementary and middle schools. Now, in order to meet the minimum requirements to apply to this program, I had to get two major things checked off. The first was my academic requirement. The second was my experience requirement. Luckily, because of the classes I already took back in my earlier university days, I just needed to finish 3 more courses. So starting in June 2020, Over the span of 1.5 years, I completed these 3 courses all online. Already having so much on our plate, the only time I could get away to do my schoolwork was from 9 p.m. to midnight. During those hours, Kim would support me by putting Pico to bed and finishing off our remaining chores. So not only did Kim have to hold down the fort during the day while I worked, but also during the evening while I studied. That was exhausting for her. It was like working overtime through the closing shift. And she did that every night until Leo was born, which was when I took over putting Pico to bed. As if things couldn't get any busier, I had to also find a way to squeeze in a minimum of 100 hours working with children around the age I eventually want to teach. Ideally in a classroom setting too. For the first half of 2020, this was impossible. Classes were no longer getting together in person due to COVID. Another challenge was that I had full-time work from Monday to Friday until 6:30 p.m. when most, if not all, after-school programs for that age group were already done for the day. Yeah, there wasn't much I could do. Hoping that it would count for something though, I did volunteer as an assistant teacher to my church's youth group, but it wasn't in a classroom setting and it was just 4 girls. So in tandem with their school year, from September 2020 to July in the following year, we all got together over video conferencing at first, and then later, when social distancing measures lightened up, we all got together in person, and my time with them totaled only 66 hours. I didn't know how I was supposed to get the rest of my experience hours before my application deadline in January 2022, but I knew that continuing on with the youth group was not going to work. Desperate to make my hours, I used up all of my vacation days and took some additional time off of work to volunteer at an elementary school during their usual daytime hours. I was able to get about 70 hours of really good classroom experience as an education assistant in a grade 5 class. But in the end, that was still not enough. Yeah, my application that year was rejected. The admissions advisor told me that although I did meet the minimum experience requirement, my hours still fell below the competitive average of 200 hours. I was pretty disappointed, especially after all the sacrifices we had to make as a family. But I decided to try again, one last time. And so again, I used up all of my vacation days and took some additional time off of work to volunteer. This time, I was an education assistant to a grade 7 class. Then, it finally happened to me. During the year that I performed the best I ever had at the company. During the year I had to work more overtime hours than any other year. During the year that I had to be away on work trips longer than any other year. When I had to watch my children grow up so much in a matter of days through a screen, my workplace laid me off. They laid me off a whole year before my B.Ed program would even start if I got accepted. Yeah, following the trend of tech companies doing mass layoffs at the time, my workplace dropped many of us holding senior positions within the company. And even though I knew they'd eventually do this to me, I didn't expect it to happen so soon. So inconveniently in the middle of my escape plan. So because of their timing and all the other BS that they put me through all those years, I was very disappointed. Well, I had to find another job right away. But despite trying my best and doing all the things I'm supposed to do, I just kept on getting rejected. And 1 month of unemployment turned into 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months. That brought me to such a low place that I couldn't even get excited when I finally, in late May, got the news that I've been accepted into the education program at UBC. So yeah, after all of that hard work, starting September 2023, I'm going to be a full-time student all over again. The program, from what I've heard, is pretty intense, so I'm thinking I might try to work 1 day a week to stretch out our savings a little longer. And since weekends are the busiest times for restaurants, and since restaurants accommodate all kinds of work schedules, I figured I'd give it a shot and work at a restaurant for the first time. So that's what I've been doing, working minimum wage, not even as a server, but a server's assistant to start, and it's been fun. Yeah, compared to a desk job, time goes by so much faster. But this work has also been quite humbling, exhausting, and tough on my emotional sensitivity when the chefs are under a lot of stress. So that's my big update. I'm going back to school to become a teacher.